started. There we go, it's being recorded now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to welcome Erika and pass over to Erika. And I think that's everything set up. Can you hear me, Erika? Is everything good for you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can, so that seems to be working well. So I'll just sit in the background. I'll hopefully give you a 2-minute warning when we get close to the time.
Thank you very much. I hope my connection holds up. If it doesn't, I may have to switch the video off. So hello, everybody, and thank you very much for this lovely event. My name is Erika Corradini, and I work as a Principal Teaching Fellow in the Center for Higher Education Practice at the University of Southampton. So today I'm going to talk about a study that I ran a year ago, roughly, which sort of hopefully will bring together education research and teaching practice towards a model for professional learning in higher education. Apologies. So I want to discuss the application of action research in learning and teaching development, explore new approaches to developing educators, and also reflect on some of the implication of a pedagogy or andragogy based on researching the practice of teaching, which again goes back to some of the very interesting presentation that we've heard earlier this morning. I, like Helen did this morning in her presentation, I went back to the concept of excellence, which again bothers me as much as probably other people, mainly because I find that it's not very measurable and it's become like a name for pretty much everything or a tag for pretty much everything. And I also find that this concept is not accessible for everybody and for some academics in particular. So I would like to, again, bring the focus on the experience of teaching, of which I found a definition on the Oxford English Dictionary, as the actual observation of facts or events considered as a source of knowledge, which is much more accessible to academics and also subject to continuing professional development through experimentation and also, as we said this morning, through improvisation. So the questions that I asked myself when I started thinking about these topics, and in particular when I started doing a study, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment, are these. So how can action research support the experience of teaching? How, and perhaps most importantly, when do lecturers develop evidence-based, valid and reliable measures for their teaching? And how can we as academic developers identify the behaviors, the practices and the ways of thinking which support the learning process and its development? So in other words, how do we create that academic culture which sort of supports or makes space for intellectual growth and also for growing teaching practice? And also, how can we support this professional learning by creating advantages for the individual, the students, the co-workers, and also the academic communities? And again, going back to some of the discussion we had in the chat earlier this morning, how can we develop that coaching and mentoring culture in education which supports the delivery of teaching rather than the a specific discipline? So I started from the sort of, again, rather controversial, at least in research-intensive universities, idea or perhaps ideal of the teacher as educational researcher, which again, MacFarlane and Hughes sort of invoked as a necessary attitude to developing teaching practice. So that of the educational researcher model places research into learning and teaching as an evidential basis for the continuous improvement of professional practice and institutional policy. And moving on from this concept, I started my study, which aimed to investigate lecturers' engagement with scholarly approaches to education and aimed to problematize the benefits of pursuing action research as a means to develop learning and teaching. I collected evidence from reflect text that the participants in the study wrote as a part of a professional development program they took sort of part in. And I have to say at this point that this professional development program was absolutely optional, so people were already motivated to do it. That's one of the limitations perhaps of this study, but also some people were motivated by their line managers sort of telling them to do it effectively. So again, it was mixed. And the analysis of these texts moved along two distinct but interrelated lines, which again go back to the what David's presentation sort of mentioned this morning, this concept of competence plus, especially points 1 and 2, I remember from the slides. So the application of the pedagogical concepts in teaching practice, and also the transfer of research into teaching. So this reflection-mediated method focused on reflective text that in which students sort of reflected on how they applied pedagogical theory, how they collected and analyzed the evaluation data, and then following on from that, reviewed and changed the education design and their teaching. So the analysis was on a small corpus of 9,000 words approximately, and was carried out to determine whether or not there was an indication that educators had changed their behaviors, their teaching, as a result of researching their teaching practice. So the immediate sort of findings showed a cause-effect relation between the adoption of evidence-informed approaches and a positive impact, or what they felt was a positive impact on practice, and also an indication that the analysis of evaluation justified a change in the design of the teaching. And a set of other emerging behaviors, which I have grouped under 3 main sort of overarching themes, as sort of effective design, research, move from research to practice, and support networks, which again I will not sort of go into much details, and perhaps if anyone has any questions later, I'm happy to sort of go back to this slide. The impact on educators of, again, this approach was to support an ability to transfer education research to practice in a productive way, and also to foster or nurture an ability to use data in making sense of teaching and learning processes, repeat these mechanisms, and also to improve the potential for institutionalizing some support systems or some networks which would, again, underpin or support lecturers in doing so. And some of the participants also noted the impact on students, which I've summarized with 3 quotes because of the space on this slide, really. So somebody noticed that the project left them and the students with a mutually positive experience, where evidence of change was observed by both parties, and small improvements in students' achievement, but also an enhanced ability to reflect on strategies for enhancing students' learning, and also through the analysis of the data, increased awareness that students require something or of the student's need. So the development pedagogy, this is very rudimental diagram which came out of this study, where you have this teacher researcher or teachers able to research their own sort of teaching practice in the middle, juggling all the I hope you can see my cursor, juggling all the sort of these dimensions, the elements around the sort of the center of this diagram. So some of these support structures are not yet institutionalized, at least in our institution, and it becomes therefore very difficult for lecturers to actually implement them in their own practice. For example, some of the support networks are not, yes, thank you for the 2 minutes, I'm nearly done. So some of the support networks are not in place. The ethics sort of clearance is very complicated. And also the dynamics between the institution and individual are very complex to navigate. And other parts are a little bit better supported, like, for example, the methods. Again, there are programs like PG Cert, which support this, and the choice of research contact, and also show some impact, if sort of immediate, on the teaching practice. So what next? So following on from this study, sort of I came up with ideas for protecting the ability, for creating and enhancing, and perhaps for, again, experimenting in teaching and learning. The idea to nurture diverse community and support networks to protect the space and the time for developing teaching and learning. And also, why not, something that, especially in research-intensive university, is really still not quite supported in the way perhaps it should be, think outside of comfort zone and look over the parapet in relation to teaching and learning. And this is the end of my presentation. I wish to thank you very much for listening to me. There are some references that you can again check in the slides on the website. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Erika. I'm just going to ask if people could just do a kind of round of applause. Oh, I see people are doing it already. That's lovely. So you're getting a round of applause in the conversation pane. I'm sure you can see that already. We had quite a lot of interesting conversation. You've probably had your eye on it. The first bit that I kind of picked out, there were remarks from quite a few people saying that, especially towards the beginning, the kind of points you were touching on there, people are already gathering data from their PG certs just incidentally, which kind of facilitate this kind of inquiry that they could be doing themselves. And then there was some comments to do with people could use portfolios or PellPad or whatever they're using to facilitate this kind of thing for their participants. One question I did get, so one question I got here that I picked out is, someone was saying that we often don't explicitly discuss the benefits of integrating pedagogical theory and practice with participants on programs or CPD courses. So we introduce academics to theory, and we help make meaning, but we don't say why. And so I was wondering if you had any kind of ideas about that, or any kind of ideas why we as developers don't tend to do that.
I don't know why we don't tend to do that. I certainly have a very similar experience. I also sort of often experience, especially in PG Cert programs, what some of the participants, some of the sort of the other people have said, that you sort of expose participants to pedagogical theory, but sort of encouraging them to use it in a way which might be useful for them and meaningful for them is the real challenge here. And I think that in time, again, with a lot of experimentation and with projects like this one that I've been talking about, things have been a little bit better, but certainly there is an area that is an area for further development. And again, if there is one weakness, or again areas for further improvement that I think I would like to address in my own practice, would be the transfer of from again pedagogical theory onto practice, and you know, having sort of data which show how that happens.
Thank you. I've got a question from myself, if I could be a bit selfish and kind of hog the spotlight here. When I was looking through your abstract a while ago, one of the things that jumped out to me was it was a comment to say that all the kind of recent structures to do with excellence have forced research and teaching to kind of interact more closely. That's quite a passion of mine. I was wondering whether you've noticed any kind of participants reflecting on that kind of result coming out of the kind of activities you're talking about here, given the kind of use of action research and so on.
Yes, I think, well, Yes, provided that we all agree on what excellence means, which again it's another sort of difficult area. But yes, I think that the fact that again, especially in research-intensive universities, everything has got to be sort of supported by data or evaluation of impact. Whether or not that is right or wrong is something I don't want to go into, but certainly that impetus has sort of prompted people to think a little bit more about how they evaluate their teaching and how they use those data sets more strategically for, again, developing their teaching, often in line with some of the strategies of the universities. So that on the positive side. Obviously, we all know we're all part of this sector, so we all know that there are also downsides to that. But that has, in my opinion, sort of made a little bit, given it a push. let's put it that way.
Thank you. And there's quite a lot of conversation now building up in the conversation pane that I'm not really going to touch on because it's kind of going in its own direction. But it might be interesting to have a look at that if anybody's kind of not in the conversation pane, just to kind of see where things are going there. So thank you, Erika. I'm going to hand over now